have the right,
Yes, I know what you're referring to here. And this is, he's quoting HPB here, and she says, according to the quote, when you consider and remember those days in 1875 and after, in which you could not find.
Let's see if I can pull it up. Would it be here? Wow. Oh, I would have to maybe go like this. Go like this. How do I bring up the chat? Library, maybe here. Projects, tasks, inside. Oh, here it is. So, judge, let's see. Is this the last one? Here it is. There it is. Maybe I can go back a little bit.
long article.
So you don't, yes, you don't, and I can read it if you like. It's a wonderful paragraph.
Did I have the right,
Yes, I know what you're referring to here. And this is, he's quoting HPB here, and she says, according to the quote, when you consider and remember those days in 1875 and after, in which you could not find any people interested in your thoughts, and now look at the widespreading influence of theosophical ideas, however labeled. It is not so bad. We are not working merely that people may call themselves theosophists, but that the doctrines we cherish may affect and leaven the whole mind of this century. This alone can be accomplished by a small, earnest band of workers who work for no human reward, no earthly recognition, but who, supported and sustained by a belief in that universal brotherhood of which our masters are a part, work steadily, faithfully in understanding and putting forth for considerations the doctrines of life and duty that have come down to us from immemorial time. Falter not so long as a few devoted ones will work to keep the nucleus existing. You were not directed to found and realize a universal brotherhood, but to form the nucleus for one. For it is only when the nucleus is formed that the accumulations can begin that will end in future years, however far, in the formation of that body which we have in view.
Thank you, Russ, so much.
Thanks, Russ.
That's great.
That's really great. Okay, so, yes, please.
Oh, wait, we still need that. Yeah, you have to look at here.
Oh, I didn't see it.
It's hard to see it.
So,
Does that work?
I don't see it.
Up here at the top.
Oh.
I can try and get this thing closer, I guess. Sorry.
So,
There was Laura, then Kim, then Kurt, then,
okay. All right.
Oh, you know what? Let's see, Brett, what if you, put that side thing back up again? Maybe I can do it from here.
Okay, so I can see who's,
Yeah, so we can see a whole lineup.
yeah.
Okay, so how would that be? Can you do it from your computer, Brett, back there? Put that spread of everybody.
Who's, wants to respond?
Oh, wait, I can do it from me from here. No, well, this isn't very good. No, too big. That's ridiculous.
I think Laura is already unmuted, so maybe she can ask her question while you're
Yeah,
doing
I
the
would love
technological
to.
part.
I would love to. We have this article by Mr. Judge, where he says universal brotherhood is a fact in nature. And the words that I heard today were this idea of responding to the environment, membrane, connect, magnify, move humanity higher is another term, each member a center, and creating a vehicle. And then the word accumulation. And so I'm thinking in terms of universal brotherhood is a fact in nature. Just what is it that we are forming and what is accumulating around that form? Because it says to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood. So that's interesting in regard to the idea that universal brotherhood is a fact in nature. So what is the form and what is accumulating?
So if we want to, I'll give it a go. I think we're here to support one another as individuals and in community. So each person is recognized with dignity, with value, and we work for the well-being of the individual and the whole through community and through our connection in nature. That's how I look at life. And what I try to give every day in that regard. So perhaps someone else would like to chime in about what that means. If not, I'll go. Okay. So,
That's a really good question, I think.
do you want to say anything?
Jean or Jonathan or myself.
Yeah, do you want to say anything?
Again, Laura, it was the form, and the other part was the
Accumulation.
Accumulation, what is being accumulated around that nucleus? And Jean spoke of the membrane as well, which is the form, that seems to be really important in this as well. Because universal brotherhood itself is a fact in nature.
well, again, universal brotherhood is a fact in nature is what I would call the view. This has to do with the universal view. And the form has to do with at any point in time as our culture and the Theosophical movement evolves, the form would then be literally the appropriate skillful forms for any period of time, and these change. the language changes, the expression changes, the modes change. To me, that's the form. Forms wear out if they get stuck in past, hundreds of years, thousands, whatever. Forms need to change and be brought into the current dynamic point that is the manifestation of that universal and particular relative factors of any cycle or any time period. I don't know if it makes sense. This is my idea at the moment. This is universal brotherhood of fact and nature. Is again, you can use different metaphors. So there's the image again, like April started off with Indra's net. So this is, Indra's net is a image of universal brotherhood of fact and nature. Everything is unified and interdependent, therefore, universal brotherhood.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that Eugene and Tim, if you want to say anything in this regard.
At the time the society was being, the Theosophical movement was birthed, there was a clear form that was trying to be created, this organization, this grouping of people who get it, basically, or who at least are trying to get it, and are sufficiently less self-absorbed that they're able to actually connect with this more deeply. And I think the fact in nature, universal brotherhood is a fact in nature. The infinity of the universe is a fact in nature. The fact of the divinity that's at the core of each and every one of us, that's one of those facts in nature that we find ourselves separated from. And so I think in many ways, the accumulation takes place when there is a form, when there's a receptacle that is adequate for the purpose. And the thing that Blavatsky and others always seem to just rail about was the idea that, at the most basic levels, we as people just keep on falling short of what would be required for even a brotherhood of the type of, she compared it sometimes to the Masons, or just that level of brotherhood was something that was difficult to attain. And so I think part of it is that, there is, when you have that, there's the possibility for these energies to accumulate, to express themselves through this movement. When you don't have it, they're constantly leaking out. And so you just don't, so I mean, that seems to be the work that was put before us, to create, to perfect the form, so that it can accumulate the essence that can then be spread abroad. I mean, I think that might be a way of putting it.
And the only thing that we would say is what's already been said, but perhaps with just a little twist, and that is, if brotherhood is a fact in nature, that is the underlying archetypal structure. It is perfect. When I think about the nucleus of the universal brotherhood, and sorry to be a party pooper, but I mentioned to Jonathan yesterday that I'd probably say it. In letter 6 of the Mahatma letters, the teachers say, quote, "The chiefs want a brotherhood of humanity, a real universal fraternity started, an institution which would make itself known throughout the world and arrest the attention of the highest minds." And perhaps the lack of our ability to conform to the underlying archetypal truth of that net or that image of universal brotherhood is what creates the karma that causes the disruption. And so what we have to accumulate is the right views, the right understandings, the right actions the right love and compassion for each other as a brother sisterhood of sentient life, of humanity. And then all the gifts that must follow from that spiritual path will accumulate naturally.
So then that says to be children of one sweet mother, as the voice of God says.
Yeah. Indeed.
Oh, technically 5:45, we can go to 6.
And then all the gifts that must follow from that spiritual path will accumulate naturally.
So then that says to be children of one sweet mother, as the voice of God says.
Indeed.
Technically 5:45, we can go to 6.
Okay, good.
So we got lots of time.
Okay, good. This is my first crack at moderating, so I'm learning the ropes.
But in 20 minutes, we all have to go out on the sidewalk and take pictures of ourselves.
Uh-oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I hope not. Well, so I see a list here. Yes. So Kim, are you still there?
Yeah, just a quick comment, the DNA, if it did not have a nucleus, or even a nucleolus, which is even more specialized, if it did not have a nuclear membrane separating it from the cytoplasm, the DNA will get destroyed because the cytoplasm is highly chemically active. And so the nuclear membrane actually protects the DNA then. So by analogy, it seems like maybe, well, really what HBB's quote was about, that Russ Law read, that purity of the DNA can be preserved as we create a purified nucleus. So I was just wondering if that idea of a purified space for the DNA to function could be explored a little bit, or not. Just a comment, maybe.
Oh, I think it's a good question.
You have more you can make.
Oh.
It's further question that.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Don't just stop. Okay. So Kim just mentioned this idea of kind of the protective component. Well, is that the protection of the membrane? Of the outside membrane or the membrane around the nucleus?
Yeah, the membrane around the nucleus, protecting it from the highly active rest of the cell. And then, of course, the outer membrane of the cell needing to be sensitive, like Ken was mentioning.
Yeah, that's the communication with the outside world. And that's the whole thing, too, because Ken Campos mentioned the idea that there's a certain amount of filtering or discernment and so forth that the nucleus would symbolize, especially the DNA. But also this outside membrane, because the membrane is what discerns what's going to go in and out, right? And is sensitive to the outside world, which is what was brought up in terms of the needs of humanity. But going back to this inner membrane, Kim, is there a special name for the inner membrane that's around the nucleus?
The nuclear membrane.
Thank you. It would be that way, wouldn't it? So, the nuclear membrane, and also the purity of the system and of the DNA. And there's, it's a little, and it can become a source of contention. I'm the one that has the pure water. I'm not Theosophical. My Theosophy stuff is more pure than yours, right? So it's a trouble with the brotherhood part of that, right? But there is a purity of transmission that is being asked to do, right? In other words, in some ways, the DNA is the brotherhood of bodhisattvas, the brotherhood of Mahatmas, because without them, nothing would happen. But that gets into a lot of trouble. If people think about them with the heart, then people can stay out of trouble. It's a hard reality. But if people are too intellectual about it, they start trying to bring them down to our kind of impure level. So the idea is to transmit Theosophy into the world, and to be have the most fidelity as possible to their message. And so that means trying to figure out, well, who are their messengers, but also to be universal about it, because we don't really know everything. A lot of us have confidence that HPB was one of their messengers, and that's something that most Theosophists can hang their hat on. At least they feel like it. And then, consistent with that, and a lot of people read the Mahatma letters for that reason. They're saying, well, wait a minute, let's just go to the source. So, but the fact that they used her as a messenger tells you something about what they were thinking about what humanity was probably ready for, if that makes sense. And the fact that she was, we were talking about that in the restaurant earlier, that she had a sense of self enough so that she could be a faithful messenger. And there's this idea of Countess Wachtmeister asking her the question, well, really, if there was HPB and two Mahatmas writing the secret doctrine, how could you tell the difference between yourself and the Mahatmas in terms of because they were giving her the teachings psychically? She says, oh, I can tell. I can tell the difference between my voice and other people's voice. So, in other words, a person would have to be a certain amount individuated in order to be a faithful messenger, if that makes any kind of a sense. But I'm not really doing very much with the cell nucleus, with the membrane, the nuclear membrane. So if anybody else has any comments on that.
Well, my question was kind of along similar lines, actually.
Go ahead, please.
You want to throw out the soup?
Yeah,
Yeah, me as well. We were thinking that rather than sticking only with biological correspondence or analogy to what's being referred to, that other analogies would be helpful as well. And I think Jean kind of mentioned this. We have the beautiful description in the second fragment of the voice, right? That disciples, we could say, what is a disciple? Well, a disciple would have to be an aspirant of the universal brotherhood, for one. Disciples may be likened to the strings of the soul echoing vina, mankind unto its sounding board, the hand that sweeps it to the twofold breath of the great world soul. The string that fails to answer beneath the master's touch, in dulcet harmony with all the others, breaks and is cast away. So this idea that a nucleus of universal brotherhood would be a group of strings on a vina that are playing in harmony to the great world soul. And I think keeping the analogy very open-ended like that, but in terms of the sound rather than physical structures, is very helpful, because sometimes that vina is going to be in tune and sometimes it's not, and sometimes those strings are playing in harmony and sometimes they're not, and it may only be in certain conditions that at a certain time and place that suddenly there's this magnificent golden age harmony that is emitted. And we were thinking about something that HPB says, that this idea of establishing a true center of universal brotherhood was something humanity had waited for over 18 centuries, and that had failed again and again, right? So my question was going to be along the lines of, should we assume that we haven't yet met we haven't yet touched that ideal, which would, again, would also be truth at a distance. Yes, brotherhood is a fact in nature, but for human beings, it's an ideal at a distance that we're always having to strive for. And then in which new obstacles and conditions arise, continually arise, that we have to respond to and readjust, to be back in harmony and so on. So, but should we assume that maybe we did at some point in our lives, with a few others in our circle, kind of reach that really kind of a crescendo of that harmonic unity in which something valuable, of extreme value and healing, was transmitted to the world, and that it can't ever be repeated in the same way that it was, but it can move on to new dimensions and be expressed in new ways as we move into the new age and so on. But also just this idea of thinking that we're not quite there yet. It's something that we need to make further transformations in order to accomplish. And just as the last point is that it would seem that if there were centers of only 4 or 5 of us in a group somewhere in India or England or New York, wherever they happen to be, who were truly able, with this kind of unconditional regard for one another and cherishing of this divine wisdom that's been given, and they're working together, they were able to resonate, at least for a time, to universal brotherhood. Wouldn't they automatically connect with all other such centers, whether both in time and space? And that's that quote from Emerson or Thoreau that I love, where he says, when he is able to raise the veil on deity, even for a moment, that there is no distance in time or space between the Gnostic and the Sufi and the Hindu who was doing the same, no matter in what age that was. So I'll stop there.
Right. I can feel that compassion, that universality and compassion can be brought about in different ways by different people at different moments. But it's all coming from that connection, that deep spiritual connection with the oneness of all life. It's very touching. Now, was that, I didn't get your name. Was your name David? Or was it?
That was Kurt. That was Kurt.
Oh, that was Kurt.
Right.
Okay, so.
Can I just
Please.
Just a tad to 1 and 2, Kim's and Kurt. For Kim's, and I think Kurt mentioned things in line with this as everyone has. But this thought comes to mind only because we're wrapping up the ocean of theosophy, or we did wrap it up. And that membrane around the nucleus, perhaps Judge talks about that in the last chapter in regards to the aura at the astral level that surrounds every being. It can be pure, and it can repel and reflect all negative influences, or it can be infected. And so if we as centers, as Judge suggests, are truly reinforcing that invisible atmosphere about us, wherever we go, we are communicating an invisible influence, as was suggested, to the environment, the community, and the world around us. And perhaps that gets paid forward. And so, it's a small scale, but if everyone that is studying the teachings does it, it becomes exponentially large. And the truth is, all we have to do is look at the world. We have not established the core that the chiefs wanted as of yet. But if we think about the chessboard, and we think about, I think, as Tim mentioned, the different organizations in their own way doing that universal brotherhood, sisterhood thing. And we think about all of the lodges all over the world. If there were just a central mind that could coordinate that, to send out a wave of concentrated effort continuously, perhaps as HPB said, from century to century, in regards to universal brotherhood and sisterhood and sentient lifehood, wave after wave after wave, it wouldn't take long. The golden rule of divide and conquer is what we've been subjected to.
I like the way he says universal brotherhood, sisterhood includes sisters, and that reminded me of Vivekananda's Sisters and Brothers of America, his introduction to his other topics in the Parliament of Religions.
And perhaps meetings like this that can go beyond the bound conquer, wave after wave after wave, it wouldn't take long. The golden rule of divide and conquer is that is made. And we think about all of the lodges all over the world. If there were just a central mind that could coordinate that, to send out a wave of concentrated effort continuously, perhaps as HPB said, from century to century, in regards to universal brotherhood and sisterhood and sentient lifehood, wave after wave after wave, it wouldn't take long. The golden rule of divide and conquer is what we've been subjected to. And perhaps meetings like this that can go beyond the boundaries that are artificial and superficial and based on appearance only can finally drop the egoic aspect to come together to look at the heroic aspect that relates to all of universal humanity.